Welcome to the Food Revolution Summit, where we explore how you can heal your body and your world with food. I'm Ocean Robbins, and the interview you're about to see is with Dr. Michael Klaper. Michael Klaper, MD, has practiced preventive and nutritional medicine for more than 4 decades. He has served as nutrition advisor to NASA's programs for space colonists on the Moon and Mars, and on the Nutrition Task Force of the American Medical Students Association. He's the co-founder of Moving Medicine Forward, which brings nutritional education into medical schools. Dr. Klaper is also the author of several books, a popular speaker, and one of the foremost experts in the world on how you can use food and lifestyle to take your health to the next level. His TEDx talk, The Most Powerful Strategy for Healing People and the Planet, has been seen by more than 1 million people. In the interview you're about to see, we're going to talk with Dr. Klaper about the science of nutrition, what we can do to improve the future of life on Earth, and a lot more. Michael, welcome.
Good to be with you and your viewers.
Great to be with you again. We've had so many wonderful conversations over many years since I was a youngster.
Indeed.
So grateful to be with you now today as we continue this work together. I want to start off talking a little bit about sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? So tell us, what is the effect on the human body of consuming added sugar?
Well, we all have a sweet tooth, and nature gave us that desire for sweetness on our tongue because when we were foraging in nature, if there was a collection of honey from wild bees, etc., boy, there's quick calories, there's quick glucose, and we are glucose-burning organisms. So we have natural propensity towards sweetness. But as humans have evolved and become very clever for refining sugar out of plants, especially sugar cane, sugar beets, etc., a line seems to have gotten across where throughout most of Western civilization, the sugar was used as a flavoring to put in your tea, make it taste a little sweet. And I don't have a great problem with sugar used that way. But somewhere, especially after World War II, we seem to have crossed the line, and now we're eating sugar as a food. We are eating great chunks of sugar, and people look at a donut or a cupcake or a piece of coffee cake, and they put it in their mouth, ooh, it tastes good. But they don't realize you've just eaten 5-10 grams of fructose, dextrose, maltose, these rapidly absorbed sugars that flow throughout the body and stick to proteins all over the body. It was never meant to be eaten in that volume. And once the proteins, and we're talking about everything from the hemoglobin in your blood to the crystalline lens of your eye, these proteins get sticky with sugar. We say they become glycosylated. And your own body heat then starts oxidizing these glycosylated proteins. The sticky proteins begin to oxidize and form what's called advanced glycation end products. Don't worry about the name. The important thing is the initials AGE. These molecules are teeming with free radicals that rip electrons off our chromosomes, off our cell membranes. They're very destructive to be eating these AGEs. And so that's the problem. So the chain goes where you eat sugar as a food, your proteins get sticky with sugar, become glycosylated, they oxidize in your own body heat and form these AGEs. And they age our tissues. They make our skin wrinkly. They open the door to cataracts in our eyes. They form on the inside of blood vessels in our brain and inhibit oxygen getting into our neurons. They're really a destructive process that we inflict upon ourselves with eating sugar as a food. So that's the first place to start, is to realize that any flour products are essentially sugar, with rare exceptions. And all these, whatever they're doing in the bakery, is probably not good for your proteins, to say the least. Baked goods are some of the first things that should be eliminated from a truly healthy diet. That's why we say whole food, plant-based, because once you grind those grains into flour, you're opening it and taking the sugar out of sugar cane, sugar beets, you're opening the door to these AGE processes. And when we look at the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease, there's lots of AGEs in the brain blood vessels. So all the way around, sugar should be used as a flavoring. But even then, throw some raisins into your oatmeal rather than pouring a cup of maple syrup on it. So it's a flavoring, not a food, and that's where you seem to get in problems.
You were just tying in bakery goods, even if they don't have added sugars per se. So are you saying that whole wheat bread? Are you saying that that a sprouted grain bread, like, are there baked goods that we can consume with the healthy conscience?
Important question, and that's why I said with rare exceptions. When you take standard wheat and you grind it into a powder called flour, it's essentially the sugars of the wheat plant, and they're absorbed very rapidly. But the less you mill, the less you process those grains, the more of the fiber and the bran and the germ that's left behind, which is what you get in these sprouted wheat breads. Then the less pure sugar is going to be absorbed, the more good things come in, the lignans, etc. So if you are going to be eating bread, absolutely, you want these sprouted whole grain breads where you can see the grains in the slice of bread there. They seem to be quite benign and helpful. But once it turns into pure flour, even whole wheat flour, which is really white flour with a little bit of the bran added back in, be wary of pure flour products. Go with the sprouted grain breads if you're going to be eating them.
Michael, what goes through your mind when you see advertisements aimed at kids for sugary breakfast cereals, for example?
Oh, my. It's so unfair. It's hard not to get a little angry because when we grew up, I grew up in the 1950s and 60s, and there were sugar cereals everywhere, and we didn't know in a way. And your parents just wanted, at least they're eating the cereal, even though it's full of sugar. The parents have all the love in their heart. But the reality is, again, what are we doing to these children's proteins throughout their body? Are we aging their tissues? What are we doing to their taste preferences, to their brain chemistry? And now we know better. It's not 1950 anymore. It's 70 years later, and we know the destructive effects this has. And yet, we Homo sapiens are funny creatures, and even though we know we might be hurting a whole generation of kids, if there's money to be made, it seems to blind the folks in power in the industry. Say they keep churning this stuff out. But sugar should not be eaten as a food, especially in the form of those treats that are given to children, for sure. Get those kids eating mangoes and grapes and sweet fruits early on. Don't subvert and pervert their taste with these sugary treats.
I know that as a physician, your first goal is helping people's health. I also know that for you personally, the treatment of animals is a significant thing. And can you tell us why compassion is part of human well-being and why you think it's important for us to care about the lives of other creatures for even our own well-being as people?
In my mind, and I did a lot of my growing up on my uncle's dairy farm in northern Wisconsin in the 1950s. There were animals everywhere. And they're wonderful and magical, from the frogs and salamanders in the pond to the hawks and birds flying around to the cows and the pigs that we had. And they're creatures, they're beings. And I can see the look in the cow's eyes, the purr of the cat. They are experiencing their life just as intensely as I am experiencing mine. And I learned early on, I heard the cries of injured animals, and I heard the sounds as the bulls were being shot, and the mother cow mooing after her baby's been taken away from her. My uncle would take, within a day of the calf being born, my uncle wants that milk, so he'd take the calf away, and she'd be locked up in the stanchion, bawling for hours, the most heart-rending, soul-tearing moves that go on hour after hour. This mother creature just had her baby taken away, clearly was in distress, and it pulled at my heart. I just ached. I went crying to my mother, what is wrong with that cow? Well, that's just the way it is, dear. This is a dairy farm. and it was never really explained to me, but I can still feel that ache in that mother's heart and my own. And it comes down to suffering is suffering. If you're a sentient creature, you've got a nervous system, you can react to pain, you can suffer. And what right do we have to inflict suffering on anything, let alone any other creature? I don't want to inflict suffering on a redwood tree, let alone a kitten or a duck or a cow or any other animal. And I want to live a life of nonviolence, of ahimsa, I want to go through this life with as smooth a wake left behind me as possible, with as few ruffled feathers and as few suffering creatures inflicted as possible. I know I step on microbes as I walk, but as the greatest extent possible in my control, I want to minimize the suffering I leave behind. And so what am I paying for in my purchases, when at the restaurant, in the supermarket? Am I causing suffering in my choices and my purchases? And in this modern life, yes, we are is the answer. There's a lot of animal suffering involved in the production of foods. But there's a lot we can do. We can make these choices to not choose those products that inflict suffering on other creatures. So, yes, I'm a big fan of causing as little suffering as possible.
Do you think that compassion is good for human health?
Is compassion beneficial for human health? Absolutely. I mean, how can a person do? I'm stunned, but not really surprised as a physician. Those poor people who work in slaughterhouses, and all day they are killing pigs, they're killing calves, they're killing these beautiful animals. By definition, it's an act of cruelty. And I don't know how they do it hour after hour. They must steal something in their being. But they go home and they have a higher incidence of everything from alcoholism to domestic abuse to early cancers to heart attacks to high blood pressure, diabetes. Is it from what? From really a lack of compassion. And now there's economic reasons. I feel bad for these people, but some part of you've got to turn that compassion off as you kill that animal. And they suffer because of it. And that's an extreme example, but as we harden ourselves to watching the news and when we see effects of war and suffering, and we harden it off and we turn on the sports page and sports program, I think society suffers from that, a hardness, a lack of civility, lack of compassion. And I think that shows up again with the alcohol and the violence and the political strife, etc. So, yes, we really felt compassion for each other and for the animals. What a wonderful world this would be. So we're suffering from chronic hypocompassionitis, I guess, in our society is my diagnosis.
There have been programs where prisoners were given dogs or cats to care for, and their recidivism rate dropped substantially. Yeah, and it seems that just that connection or having love or empathy with another creature built something in them that made them a better person, if you will. And I wonder if the same isn't true for all of us, that when we feel empathy or connection or compassion to other life forms, maybe that makes us better people. Do you think so?
Does connection with other people make us better human beings? Absolutely. We are social creatures. We are tribal creatures. We need our family. We need each other. What's one of the cruelest things that happens in a prison population is punishment. You put someone in solitary confinement. You cut him off or her off from a connection with our fellow beings. And we can't live like that. And the opposite is true. When people just do nice things for people or random acts of kindness, everyone benefits from the act itself, but the person who does the act, the beneficiary, there's no question a connected society that really treats each other with respect and reverence and compassion. No question the individuals will be healthier and the entire society will be healthier. Absolutely. Let's hear it for connection.
Paul McCartney once said, if all slaughterhouses had glass walls, we'd all be vegetarian. Can you tell us, what do you think the meat industry doesn't want us to see or know?
The meat industry has been absolutely masterful at the greatest vanishing act in the world that would make Houdini jealous that, I mean, the numbers, as you're aware of, are staggering. How many hundreds of millions of cows, pigs, chickens, animals are slaughtered every year. And yet we don't see it, we don't hear it. You drive through the countryside and there's these anonymous sheds way up on the hillside there, and you don't think much about what's happening. What's happening in those sheds are there's 100,000 pigs in that huge installation of sheds there. There's 10,000 cows in those sheds. And the meat industry has just been masterful in hiding it from the public because Paul McCartney's right. If people could hear the screams, they could smell the blood and hear the fear in these animals' sounds. People say, I don't want to pay for that. And the meat industry knows that. And so they put pictures of happy cows and happy chickens on their product packages. But they've really been successful in hiding this atrocity from the people who are ultimately paying for it and consuming it. It's quite a remarkable feat.
Let's talk a little bit about the cosmetics industry for a second. Is animal testing still part of the cosmetics industry? And if so, what should we know about that?
I am not an expert in animal testing, and I haven't been keeping up on the latest advances or changes in that industry. But I can't help but think that certainly animal products are used. Every time I look at a carton of shampoo on the shelf in the store there, and I see keratin as part of their shampoo, and that's animal hide, that's animal collagen that they're digesting and putting into the shampoo. So there's no question there's a background chord of animal exploitation. Are they still dropping hair conditioner into the eyes of rabbits and the veg? Probably not. And some of the wonderful trends that are happening in our society, and I give full credit to Neil Barnard and his team at Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine for talking some creative sense into these people. Say, well, you can find out if you put a drop of that onto this computer chip you can find out that probably a pretty good prediction whether it's going to be irritating or not. And they're trying to take the animals out of animal testing, and the sooner that happens, the better. Because I suspect there's still a lot of mice and frogs and other creatures are still still being subjected to these dreadful caustic tests, etc. So less is more when it comes to animal exploitation, for sure.
In the world of nutrition, it seems like every week there's some new best-selling diet book with another new gimmick for how to, hack nutrition and be healthy.
Right.
We hear about these come down the pike all the time with different approaches, and whether it's the Whole30 or South Beach or it's the grapefruit diet or what have you, right? And some of these may have benefits, some may not. What can you tell us a little bit about this dynamic, and also about what people actually need to know to get through the marketing and know what's actually good for them?
What is it going to take for us to learn this simple, basic truth? I have a slide in my presentations of a mountain gorilla eating some leaves and fruit. And I say that, this is the gold standard, the green standard, if you will, for human nutrition, because we're basically plant-eating hominids. We've got basically the same digestive system that our gorilla and bonobo cousins have, and they're up in the trees eating leaves and fruit and vegetation all day. They don't develop clogged arteries. They don't develop type 2 diabetes. They don't develop colitis. They don't develop the diseases of civilization that we do. And that's a profound lesson to us. The mirror image clinical validation of that is that in so many of the really successful plant-based healing programs, whether it's Dr. Furman's program, Dr. McDougall's, Dr. North, lifestyle medicine, it basically comes down to getting back to that whole plant food stream going through our bodies that normalizes blood pressure and resolves disease. So when I look at these claims to these fads, more than a fad diet, these, the nutrient du jour, it's this omega-3 or the Himalayan sea salt or acai berries, whatever it is, it's comes in at that lowest common denominator. People want that magic bullet. Oh, just give me that magic ingredient, and then not only will I be happy and healthy, but the subtext is I can eat anything I want because I've used Himalayan sea salt or acai berries or whatever the nutrient is, the soybean oil, whatever magical lipid it is this week. Again, Dr. Colin Campbell wrote this wonderful book called Whole, Whole, and he says you're going to get yourself in trouble as you start looking at these individual nutrients because they each set off cascades of reactions in the body. And we don't eat individual nutrients despite the packaging. We eat whole food. It's the whole food stream coming in. And every whole plant has thousands of phytonutrients that interact in millions of ways, and the apple reacts with the nutrients in the carrot, which reacts with the nutrients in the kale, and your body then reacts in the ways having to do with absorption and liver metabolism. We are so complex, and I think it's such oversimplification to the extreme. So, it's this nutrient is going to tune up your entire multi-million biochemical reaction body here. Come on. Make sure the whole food stream is as whole and healthy as possible, and your body will know what to do with it. So I watched in amazement and head-shaking sadness as this constant stream of marketing comes through. And that's why you and all of us are trying to say it's whole foods. Eat what nature grew in the garden for you, and your body will take care of the rest.
Love to talk a little bit about soy because it's, for many people, it's considered a staple. And for others, it's vilified. What's the truth about soy? Is it a healthy food for most of us?
Is soy a healthy food for us? In a word, yes, absolutely. In fact, we share a bit of history. I remember when your father's book, Diet for a New America, came out in the mid-1980s, and it made a big splash in the media. And we saw red meat sales start taking a dip in the late 1980s, early 1990s. And it wasn't long after that this anti-soy tsunami got unleashed on the public. And I can't think that the two were unrelated here. And because soy products and the soy burgers and the soy milks were just coming into the natural food scene. And I think the meat industry folks saw that as a threat. And so out comes this anti-soy tsunami of misinformation. And it's full of estrogens. It's like soy milk's like putting your kid on birth control pills. It causes breast cancer. And it echoes to this day. The fact that you're asking this question shows how successful that campaign was, because it still echoes. So is soy really healthy? Is it given? Well, I'm a woman. I just had a breast lump here. Should I be eating soy? Yes, you should, it turns out. Again, we were blissfully ignorant. Who knew that turns out that there's two kinds of estrogen receptors in the female breast, and the receptor that would actually cause cancer growth and cell proliferation is stimulated by mammalian estrogens, estradiol, etc., that are in dairy products, it turns out. But it turns out the soy molecules that are similar to estrogen, the phytoestrogens, they stimulate a different receptor that does not activate the cellular growth that puts a woman at risk for malignant change there. We didn't know that in the 1990s, and it's still echoing these days. But the truth is now we know that women who consume soy on a regular basis do not have a higher risk of breast cancer. We know that if a woman does have a breast cancer, it would slow down the growth of malignant cells there. And there seems to be no harm at all in feeding moderate amounts of soy to growing children. It's a good source of protein, etc. Should they be drinking 3 gallons of soy milk a day? No. And those phytoestrogens in large amounts can start having some estrogenic effects apparently. But a few cubes of tofu in your stir fry a few times a week, a little soy milk poured on your cereal in the morning is absolutely fine. So yes, the soy is a safe product, and it's been unfortunately vilified, and we need to keep educating the public that it's a valuable component of a healthy diet.
What about soybean oil? There has been some research coming out recently that indicates that soybean oil may not be so healthy for the human body. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Am I surprised to learn that soybean oil may not be healthy for the human body? No, I'm not surprised. Again, as soon as you take a whole plant food like a whole soybean and start extracting out the sugar and the lignans and the protein and the fats, and you start creating a substance that has pharmaceutical effects. In other words, if you eat a whole soybean, if you eat some edamame, boiled soybeans, there are little micro droplets of soybean oil in every one of those beans, but it's tightly bound to the soybean protein and fiber. It's absorbed slowly into the bloodstream. There isn't much of a peak, and one pass through the liver is pretty much taken out of the circulation. But a tablespoon of soybean oil, boy, that leaps into the bloodstream. Nothing slows down the absorption, and it starts having pharmaceutical effects. It seeps into the walls of the arteries and may inhibit the ability of the arteries to expand healthfully, to keep blood pressure low. It works its way into the liver cells, may inhibit insulin production, insulin function, may inhibit blood coagulation. It's an abnormal food. It has pharmaceutical effects. So could it affect hormone levels? Again, the fats in oils are taken into the adrenal glands where cortisol hormones are made, into the gonads where sex hormones are made. Could it upset the balance? Sure, it could. So anytime you fractionate whole foods into their component parts, you've created a drug essentially, and I'm never surprised when the big oops shows up. Oh, we didn't expect that. Ooh, who thought about that? Well, we should think about any time you're fractionating foods that you're going to create a food with unexpected side effects.
Can you tell us about how your waiting room expanded to include the planet, and why you think physicians should care about the health of the environment if they care about the health of their patients?
Why should physicians care about the environment if they care about their patients? Oh my. Ever since my summers on my uncle's dairy farm in Wisconsin, the idyllic 1950s, my summers were filled with blue skies and thunderstorms and walks in the forest and caring for animals and driving tractors and slinging hay bales. It was an idyllic existence. And I would spend hours walking through about 300 acres of forest, and I got to know the paths and the trees, and I would just go and sit for hours and listen to the birds become active and the deer walking by. And I just became passionate about my connection with the natural world. And went through my teens and 20s canoeing and hiking and thinking everything was fine. Two things happened. In 1981, I got a pilot's license, and I began flying in Northern California. And at 6,000 feet, you can see the clear cuts of the forest scalped off the hillside. You see the soil running off the mountainside into the streams that are running brown. And I began to see the environmental destruction. And in 1986, I then read your father's book, Diet for New America, where he expertly, it was such a beautiful book. He explained that how we mistreat animals. That spoke to my heart. The effect of a meat-based diet on our human health, expertly explained by a non-physician. He did a great job with explaining what it did to arteries and pancreases, etc. But the third part of that book about what the industrial production of animal flesh inflicts the cost that inflicts upon the planet, the forests that get cleaved off to make grazing land for beef, the vast forests that used to be in the Midwest that have been cleaved off to make vast deserts of soybeans and feed corn to shovel down the gullets of these animals that turns into just a small amount of animal flesh and huge amounts of manure. And no wonder the streams of America are running with soils and manure and fertilizers and pesticides, and the forests are disappearing. And the thought of walking into a burger restaurant and ordering a cheeseburger, yeah, I began to see the dominoes falling, how it's paying for all of that. And at that point, the connection between stop eating meat, stop growing it, stop consuming it for every reason you can think of, and for the animals, for your own health, and certainly for the planet. If we stop eating animals, we wouldn't need all this land to grow the feed corn and the grazing area. And the trees that were used to be there, they would start coming back. The forest will reseed itself. And as the trees grow, they take carbon dioxide out of the air and turn it into solid wood. They are the ultimate carbon sequestration device that Mother Nature's come up with. All we need to do is just evolve to a plant-based diet and let the forest come back, and everything will get better. The soils will stabilize, the rivers will run clean again, the global warming will reverse, the manure will disappear from the streams, etc. The planet will heal, and so will we. And it's all tied in. And a physician, we can't pretend that this is not all connected. There was a famous physician in London in the 1760s. There was a cholera epidemic, and the cholera was coming from a pump on Broad Street that was contaminated with sewage, and people were drinking from that water and getting cholera. And a physician, John Snow, made a map of cholera cases in London and where these people are getting their water, and it all pointed to the Broad Street pump. And John Snow, it's a classic chestnut from medical history, but John Snow took an axe and went up and cut the handle off the Broad Street pump and ended the cholera epidemic. And that's what a physician who sees the chain of events here, sometimes you got to do that. And I implore all physicians to stop practicing Band-Aid medicine. It's not a matter of lowering their cholesterol and putting in a stent. Why is your patient sitting in front of you? From all the flesh and sugar and salt and oil they're eating. And why are the global warming statistics getting so frightening? Because we're cutting down the trees to make all this flesh. Enough. We've used meat eating up. We've used fishing up. It's time to turn the page. If humans want to continue functioning on this planet, it is imperative we evolve our diets to become plant-eating hominids, like we should have been all along. And the earth will heal. Mm-hmm. And so when I open my waiting room door, there's planet Earth sitting there begging, please let me go back to growing trees again and let my rivers run clean again. So humans, please, enough with the killing, enough with the flesh eating. That's the message there. So it's all one. We need to take care of it all.
I'd like you to illustrate for us a little bit of where we might be headed if we don't change course. Maybe starting with the sentence, if we keep eating the way we are, and tell us what our children, grandchildren, future generations are going to face.
If we keep eating as we are, I see nothing but catastrophe in our very near future. I may or may not be able to see it, but certainly your children will, you will. What will happen is we're all sitting on seething, simmering, stewing under this heat dome. Phoenix, Austin, 40 days in a row of 110 degrees. And we're going about our business that's we're having a bit of a heat wave. No, people, this is exactly what the climate scientists were telling us is going to happen. Well, the wheat and your bread on that sandwich is trying to grow in Kansas, but it's frying in the sun here. And we risk crop failures around the world, which opens a door to famine and starvation and food riots and breakdown of civilization. As these massive hurricanes rip in, causing hundreds of billions of dollars of damage, we're going to have angry people who aren't helped or else a bankrupt government. And we're watching fires, these massive wildfires burn up the forests. And as we say, plant trees. But if they wither in the sun, it's too late for that at this point. And we've really caused massive disruptions. We're at the sliver of time, and you and I have seen this happen. We got to know each other in the 1980s, and in the last 40 years, things have gotten worse. And people are eating more flesh than ever. And if this continues, the drought will continue. Lake Mead is going to dry up. There goes the electric power for Las Vegas and LA, etc. There's just going to be cascades of disruptions till finally there's no more food in the stores. When the food trucks stop rolling into Safeways and there's no food on the shelves, you will see massive starvation and civil disintegration at that point. It's every man for itself and survivalists and shootings and all of that. So it'll be an absolute catastrophe on every level, and such a tragedy. The beauty will be lost. The animals, the wild animals. What right do we have to extinguish their species? But that will continue apace. It'll turn into a barren, desperate, sad, barely viable world. And though there may be billions of people dying of starvation and disease, and the apocalypse will happen. And Mother Nature will heal as these humans disappear. The forest will eventually come back. Animals will evolve. And this whole thing will turn into a little layer of hydrocarbon film in the geological record a million years from now. But the tragedy of it, what will be lost? The human suffering, the hearts that could have lived wonderful lives that will be lost, will be a tragedy beyond imagination. And the horror will be the living will envy the dead, as the Bible says, and that's my fear. And the tragedy is it's all avoidable if we act now.
So it's all avoidable if we act now. Tell us
Right.
what changes we could make and what that would open up.
The red lights are flashing. Homo sapiens, you want to continue living on this planet, we got a deal for you. Okay, all you need to do is choose the bean chili instead of the beef chili next time you're out for lunch. That's all, and all that implies. Start making those plant-based options the standard. Okay, stop. We've used animal eating up. Stop breeding more of them. Use the land you have to grow food for human beings. There would be so much land freed up. We would need about a quarter of the Midwest now to grow vegetables for everyone in the country, and every continent could become self-sufficient in food if we use the viable land and water for growing plant-based foods to feed directly to people. If that happens, there a ripple of positive changes then happen. One, starving people are desperate people. If you get everyone fed, we can relax. Parents want to see their children not starving. They want to see them well fed, housed, educated. Everybody on this planet wants the same thing. They want their kids healthy and educated and safe. And feeding everyone a plant-based diet would accomplish that. As I've already mentioned, with so much less land needed, the forest would come back and the tree roots stabilize the soil, so soil erosion would stop. We're getting down to our last few inches of topsoil. That process would stop. The tremendous amounts of water that we're using to irrigate alfalfa fields and feed corn and soybean fields, that water could be freed up for human civilizations and to re-nourish the land, recharge the aquifers, restore the balance here. The pollution would stop. The pesticides and herbicides wouldn't have to be sprayed. The massive amounts of animal manure would stop leaching into our rivers and streams, so the waters would run pure again. and carbon dioxide would be turned into solid wood. The global warming would start reversing. Our weather patterns would start normalizing again. It's so similar to the human body. You eat a bunch of fat and sugar, and your insulin receptors clog up, and you've got type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance. But you get on a whole food plant-based diet, and the insulin receptors clear out, and the diabetes goes away. It was just a normal response to an abnormal fuel. Well, the same thing would happen on planet Earth. Stop growing all this animal flesh and watch everything restore itself back to the normal function that we originally had. So there's still a chance for your kids and my nieces and nephews to have a stable, viable world. But the forces are so ingrained. The guys with the guns they make the laws, and they own. If I want to grow alfalfa in Arizona with that Colorado River, that's my grandfather did. I'm going to keep doing that, and you're not going to take that away from me. That mentality is going to sign our death warrant. It's time for all of us to say none of this was necessary. It's the way we did it in the past. But it doesn't mean we have to continue doing it in the future. It's time for new visioning of how things could be. And that's why two things give me hope, and that's young people and the internet. And they can put out new visions. They don't have an obligation to the sclerotic past. And they can talk to each other, and people can decide, meat eating is not cool. Stop eating that stuff. It's like wearing fur and smoking cigarettes. It's something we used to do. Stop if you want to survive. And if that message gets out in the young people, and they buy the veggie burgers instead of the beef burgers, and the bean chili instead of the beef chili, and all that implies, then we got a chance. And so rooting for your generation and the folks watching on the food revolution, we need this revolution. We need it now. This is serious business, folks. So thank you for leading the way on that.
It's true that millennials are twice as likely to be plant-based eaters as baby boomers.
Indeed.
The surge of interest in plant-based foods is being fueled by younger people.
Yeah.
Pretty dramatically. And for the most part, those younger folks aren't talking about heart disease and cholesterol levels. They're talking about the future of life on this planet because that's what's most real for them.
Absolutely.
And so I do think the facts are getting in, and this is going to be critical to our survival, and hopefully our desire to live will propel us to make the changes we need to.
That gives me hope. I saw that we'll be known, if we don't do what we need to, we'll be known as the society that refused to save itself because it wasn't cost effective.
Wow.
Really.
Yeah.
So let's avoid that fate. Choose the bean chili.
So just to lay out for a moment, if we change course,
right.
Let's suppose that we could look forward to a world where the whole of humanity is eating a whole foods plant-based diet.
Yes.
Culturally appropriate, different things, different emphases in different parts of the world, different cuisines, different spices,
Absolutely.
But everybody is basing their diet around whole plant foods. What does that future look like?
A future where people are universally consuming plant-based diets with all the ethnic variety and joy involved in that. It's a world of stability. It's a world of healing. It's a world of compassion, a world of connection. You know what everybody else knows at this point. You know that what all the restaurants would be serving. You would know that all the kids are growing up with healthy arteries. You would know that the animal suffering has stopped. You would know that the Earth's ecosystems are healing, that the waters are running clearer. There'd be a sense of optimism and of upward growth in a good way. And the idea of the consumer society would give way to the idea of the caretaker society, that we're here we're tenders of the garden here. We're not exploiters. We have dominion over the animals. Dominion comes from the word domicile. It's your house, and all these creatures are in our houses, and it's up to us to care for them. So it's a future of caring, compassion, growth, and love, and all for for gentler food choices. So I'm very optimistic about that vision.
Anything else you want to share with us today?
One of the real bottlenecks in keeping this transformation from happening in society is my noble profession. If the doctors would start talking to their patients about changing to a plant-based diet with every visit, it would change a whole lot in our society. So that's the acupuncture point that I'm working on to reach the medical students, to tell them that what your patients are eating has something to do with these diseases you're spending your career treating. And so everyone, and I'm saying it not in a braggadocious way there, but I looked around and said, what can I do? What's available to me in my particular niche? Well, I can talk to medical students. So everyone, look around and find, what can you do? Even just setting an example, just bringing a plant-based lunch to school, just and look around and see what you can do. Everybody can do something. Everybody's got a gift. Find out what your gift is, and it'll be a gift to us all.
Actually, that's something we haven't touched on, but I'd love to just hear you say a little bit about the lack of education around nutrition in medical schools, where that bias comes from, what it actually is, what the facts are about it, and why it's got to change.
My wonderful medical profession is very good at dealing with acute problems. We're good at dealing with the heart attack after the arteries clog and the strokes after the high blood pressure has caused its havoc, and the amputations after the diabetes has done its damage. But preventing these conditions, we're just dreadful at it. And we've got the model, it came from Europe back in the 1800s, make a diagnosis and a treatment, and that's what doctors do. But again, you've got to look, what's the cause of these conditions? And that's been woefully lacking. And of course, the cause of 90% of the clogged arteries and high blood pressure, et cetera, is that flesh-based diet. We're running through our arteries every 4 hours. Well, we don't want to look at that. Doctors aren't taught about nutrition. They don't respect it as a science, and they're eating the same foods themselves. They're not going to tell their patients not to eat it. Well, that's not acceptable. That has to change. Doctors need to be an example of good health and sane plant-based eating. And so the oversight is unacceptable, but it will not stand. We've got to get questions about nutrition asked on the national board exam, so medical students and medical schools take this seriously, and doctors need to learn about the power that a plant-based diet has to reverse these terrible diseases, that these are reversible diseases. Nobody told me that high blood pressure is reversible, that type 2 diabetes is reversible. We are now telling the students that through our Moving Medicine Forward initiative. So again, it's a big iceberg we got to melt, or whatever the analogy is, but we're working at it. And again, it's just going to take a flip of the, we're on monkey number 92, I think, where people are demanding their doctors know something about nutrition. And the doctors are coming to us. The med students are coming to us. We need to know about how to use plant-based nutrition. So we're happy to share that information. American College of Lifestyle Medicine is helpful there. So it's, again, like everything else, it's slowly changing, and awareness and the internet will help that happen. But
Yes.
Another situation that definitely needs improvement, and we'll improve it.
Michael, your insight, your wisdom, your leadership are legendary and soul stirring. I thank you so much for your compassion, for your initiative, for your brilliant work, and for your partnership in the food revolution.
It's been my honor. It's been decades of joy working with you, and we'll continue the work.
We will.
We will.
All right. We've been talking with Dr. Michael Klaper, a physician and a leader in the movement for healthy people and a healthy planet, and working to transform medical education so that doctors become leaders in this work. Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ocean.